Hey nerds, my playgroup has recently gotten into Canadian Highlander. It scratches that competitive itch while still having a Commander-esque feel. Oh, and it costs $0 to play. Now if you haven't heard of the format before, it's a 100-card singleton with no ban list, but instead it uses a point system to balance. Certain cards have a point value, and you can have a total of 10 points in your deck. So cards like the original Moxen are 3 points, Ancestral Recall is 8 points, Black Lotus is 7. Now the best part? Since it's a community format, proxies are 100% allowed. No need to drop hundreds or thousands of dollars on expensive staples to enjoy a competitive format. Okay, now that I've sold you on the format, how do you start playing? Picking a deck or trying to brew in a new format can be hard, especially with this deep of a card pool. Remember when you first started playing Commander? And then you have to figure out which pointed cards you want to play, also known as a point spread. And what theme, but don't worry, that's where I come in. I'm going to take this off-the-shelf Commander Precon and turn it into a CanLander ready deck for you and your friends to jam with. All we need to do is take 15 cards out and put 15 new cards in. Now before you run into the comments, the idea isn't to turn this deck into a competitive ready powerhouse. You need to make a lot more swaps than 15 to do that, but just as a starting point for you to explore the format and play casually with buds. But if you want to jump into the deep end, I'll have a link to the Canadian Highlander website and deck lists in the video description below, and make sure to check out LJT MTG over on YouTube. They're a new Canadian Highlander focused channel with veterans of the format sharing their knowledge, definitely worth checking out. And then one last thing before we get into the swaps. There are some rules I'm going to be following when I'm making swaps. Number 1, price isn't a factor. As I've said, it's a proxy friendly format, so just take a Sharpie to a basic land. Number 2, I'm not going to mention upgrading the mana base. And then number 3, I'm not going to change the color identity of the deck. While CanLander doesn't have a color identity rule, like Commander, I want to keep with the idea that you just slide in some paper in front of 15 cards and go. And adding another color means we have to tweak the mana base. Now hybrid cards like Deathrite Shaman are the exception to the rule, since you don't need to change the mana base to make them work. Okay, with all the explanations out of the way, let's get into it. Living Energy is a Temur energy mid-range deck that uses energy cards to gain value from cards like Saheeli Radiant Creator, Nissa Worldsoul Speaker, and Aetherworks Marvel. There's also an artifact sub-theme which includes cards like Reckless Fireweaver, Psymaster Thopterist, and Stridehanger Automaton, and I want to improve on both of these themes when picking cards to add to the deck. Let's start with the most exciting part, the point spread. The point spread is just the pointed cards in the deck. In this case, our points are Mox Sapphire, Mox Ruby, Tinker, and Urza Saga for a total of 10 points. The Moxen are no-brainers here since we're an artifact deck, and these are cheap ways to accelerate. Also, what other formats are you going to play Mox in? Next up is Tinker, which lets us tutor any artifact directly into play by sacrificing another artifact. So we can turn our Mox Sapphire into a portal to Phyrexia, which I've also added to the deck since we're playing Tinker. Urza Saga became pointed about a month ago at the time of recording, and it's currently sitting at 1 point. The constructs it makes can easily end the game on their own, especially when you tutor up Shadow Spear, which I also added to the deck since we're running Saga. Speaking of tutors, the next card I added was Tezzeret the Seeker. This bad boy lets us tutor Aetherworks Marvel directly into play, and it can find us an artifact land or a Mox for 0. Broadside Bombardiers is another powerhouse of the format that can turn our cheap artifacts into damage or removal late game, and if we're really lucky, maybe we can dome someone for 11 by sacrificing Portal to Phyrexia. Next, let's round out our energy package. I added Galvanic Discharge and Aether Spike as interaction. They are cheap and incredibly efficient removal. Tune the Narrative is a cantrip which gives us more energy, while Assaultron Dominator and Amped Raptor are early game threats that can still impact the board late game by giving our big creatures trample and first strike, or giving us a free spell. Blaster Hulk can hit someone for 8 or remove all of their blockers for a lethal attack. And then finally, Aether Revolt is both burn and removal as we generate energy. If we get 4 energy, we can ping someone for 4. And if we've triggered Revolt, our non-combat damage is increased by 2. So suddenly every energy we create is basically a lightning bolt. But that's just the first set of swaps. Because I really like this idea, I ended up making a second set of swaps you can try. Now, I won't always have 2 options like this, but I also wanted to build around Aetherworks Marvel. The point spread in this case is Tinker, Intuition, Mana Crypt, and Urza Saga. I also kept Portal to Phyrexia, Galvanic Discharge, Tune the Narrative, and Tezzeret the Seeker in. And because I wanted to build around Aetherworks Marvel, I added Emrakul the Aeon's Torn and Blightsteel Colossus as things we can cheat into play with Aetherworks Marvel and Nissel Worldsoul Speaker. You can also tinker Blightsteel in. Now we can use Intuition to find Aetherworks Marvel, Trash for Treasure, and Ready Rocketeer Engineer, allowing us to cheat Aetherworks Marvel into play. The new Transit Mage can also find us Marvel. And then finally, Worldly Tutor can put Emrakul, Blightsteel, or whatever creature we want directly on top of our library to cheat into play with Marvel. So now we know what we're adding, but what about the cuts? Well, let's start with the easy ones. Anything that mentions a commander. So Command Tower, Path of Ancestry, Commander Sphere, Arcane Signet, and Loyal Apprentice. There's no commanders in this, so these cards are basically do-nothings. Next, I want to cut some of the ramp. Sol Ring needs to go because we don't have enough points for it. Explosive Vegetation, Chromatic Lantern, Aetheric Amplifier, and Solar Transformer can all go too. We can also easily cut some of the more commander-focused interaction with Arcane Denial, Chaos Warp, and Reality Shift. And finally, I cut some of the bigger creatures with Aethertide Whale and Aetherwind Basker. You can find a link to both decks and their cuts in the video description below. Sideboard is the ad, and Considering are the cuts. I would love to hear your thoughts on this video, and if I've helped convince you to try CanLander. If you already played the format, let me know what you think about this deck and how I can improve this series. And if you want more content like this, hit that like button, and if you want to support the channel for free, subscribe and ring that bell. Also, check out some of my other videos shown on screen. Alrighty nerds, I'll see you in the next one.